Morning, everybody. Good to see you guys. Hope you're enjoying the rain. We always love that. We are in week 4 of the series called Walk Worthy, and we're closing this thing out today. And so to get into it, let me share this. Many people don't necessarily know this, but I was almost a music major at one point in time. That was something I was thinking about doing. I grew up playing instruments, playing in band, doing all that stuff, and I've always had a passion and affinity for music. And at some point, I stopped most of that, but there's something I kept, and I love listening to music, and like a lot. In fact, every Monday for the last 22 years, I essentially take time out of my day to go scour the internet. Spotify actually is the service that I'll use to go look for new music that I've never listened to before that I might like, or something that's not there. I don't know. And so I'll go look for all kinds of stuff. I've done this for a really long time. It's gonna sound like I'm making an advertisement for Spotify. I'm not, and I don't care, but it is what I use. So music streaming services like Spotify, here's what they do, and if you use them, you know this. They essentially pay attention to what you listen to what you don't, to what you search for, what you don't, the genres you like, the things that you don't, and it plugs all of that information into a predictive algorithm that starts to predict what you might like, what you might enjoy listening to, and it starts to eliminate what you won't. And it starts to steer you towards the genres that you'll engage in and that you'll spend some time with, and it'll avoid and eliminate genres and things that for the most part you don't. It starts to do this. And so for the last 22 years, have been literally pouring music and search and things into this Spotify algorithm, and it's gotten really good at predicting what I like. And it's gotten really good over time, because that's a lot of data, you guys, and a lot of time. It's gotten really good at eliminating what I don't. But about 16 years ago, I threw a glitch into the system. And what happened is my first daughter, we have 2 daughters, my oldest, my first daughter, she was born 16 years ago. And at that time, whenever we wanted to listen to music with our infant and eventually our toddler, I would just pull out my phone and we'd turn on Spotify and I'd play music for her. And we would do all of this until one day, she was like 2 years old, I was driving in my car. It's my favorite place to listen to music. And I'm by myself, and so I'm like, cool, I'm gonna listen to something I really enjoy, and this is gonna go great. And I'm having a great time. I'm driving down the road, and I'm listening to Radiohead, which is a band that I love. And then all of a sudden, Radiohead ends, and Spotify predicts what I would like next. And Radiohead, which I love, goes away, and is followed by, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. I'm glad you laughed. Last service, they didn't think that was funny. This happened to me, and I felt violated. And I know that sounds dramatic, and I wish I was being dramatic. I'm not. I felt violated, where I was like, what is happening? To the degree that I audibly in my car yelled, no, why is this happening to me right now? This has to stop. Like literally. And I went home and I signed up for 2 Spotify accounts so that we could keep our world separate. And my girls in my house, they now know, like anytime we listen to music, we never touch that one. And it's because it's a curated, protected algorithm that I love. And if you think I'm being dramatic, I wish I was. It's actually how this has played out. And so it's just gotten better over time. But here's what's actually ended up happening and I think this is crazy. I grew up in an era where, I really did. I grew up in an era before we used the internet to find music and to use music. And so I have all these memories of being a younger person and sitting in my room listening to the radio for hours, listening to a ton of songs that I did not like or care about, also that they would play the one song that I actually liked, so that then I could push record on my cassette recorder, time the whole thing perfectly so that I could make a sweet mixtape. I used to do this. I would spend all this time filtering through that which annoyed me, that which I didn't enjoy, that which I didn't care about, also I could get to the one thing that I liked. And I could have that. And that was fine for me. In fact, I called that a good time. It was normal. I used to do this. And now I've gotten to the spot where the moment something comes on that I don't like, that I disapprove of, a genre I'm not, the moment, if you're happy and you know it comes on, I yell out loud in my car like an insane person. No, why is this happening to me? As though I'm suddenly the victim of the universe. Think about this. And I share this with you because when your life gets shaped by a predictive algorithm, we become less and less accepting of anything that isn't our preference. When your life gets shaped by a predictive algorithm, we become less and less accepting, less and less tolerant, less and less open to anything that isn't one of our preferences. And I want you to think about this for your own life for a moment. Many of you probably use social media of some kind, right? Like Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is that you use. Think about this. Facebook, Instagram, other social media platforms, they're designed, like by nature, they're designed to pay attention to what you say, what you don't say, what you spend time on, what you don't spend time on, and all that gets plugged into a predictive algorithm that essentially they start to dial in what you're shown, what you're not shown, what you see, what you don't see, what's catered to you, so that it becomes more and more predictive to you, so that you have less and less of what you don't like, more and more of what you will engage with, so that you spend more time on their services. You essentially become more predictable to them as they predict you a little better because you spend more time. That makes them money. That's how that works, right? That's how a predictive algorithm works. Or think of this, video streaming services like Netflix or Amazon or whatever it is that you may use. They have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of titles in their libraries, but you don't see all those. Like you don't. If you've ever gone to somebody else's house and been like, where did all of these things come from? I never see any of this. It's because they have a different algorithm than you. And what happens is as you've fed that search terms and you've watched things and you've not watched things and you've done all of this, it's narrowed and narrowed and narrowed to where it's begun to predict you, to show you more of what it thinks you will like, less of what it thinks you won't like, so that you'll spend more time on it, because that's how they make money. Your news feeds, your news channels, they do the same thing. They pay attention to market data and viewership and how long you spend on your phone or whatever source you choose to get your news and things from. And essentially they pay attention. So we're gonna feed you more and more essentially of what it is we think you will like, pay attention to, spend more time with or on or care about, so that you hook into this for longer periods of time, because that generates income, that generates money. And so everything starts to narrow. What ends up happening over time when your life starts to become affected by a predictive algorithm is you get more and more and more of what you like and less and less of what you don't. Now you might be thinking, that sounds great. And I kind of think that in some regards, because it is kind of great. You know what I love? Because I love listening to music. I love that I get to listen to a lot of things that I really like all the time. And I love that I don't have to spend a lot of time listening to a lot of things that I don't. I love that. I think that's easy. I think that's great. I'm not complaining about that. But we do, as human beings, have to pay attention to one unintended consequence here. There's an unintended consequence on the back end of this that's really important. And if you're wondering why we're talking about this, it's because it's square within our passage today. The unintended consequence is this: we get so used to only experiencing what we like, what we want, and what we already agree with, that we actually lose our ability to deal with or to bear anything that we don't like, anything that's difficult and anything that's hard or disagrees with us. It's almost like a skill set we don't use, and the muscle weakens or something over time. And we just get a little worse. We get so used to everything being what we want that it's really, really hard for us at times when it's not. And if you're going, oh, I don't know about that, think about this. If you live in a house where you pay for a streaming service that doesn't have commercials, have you ever gone to somebody who doesn't pay for that same thing? And suddenly you're watching a show or a movie with them and a commercial comes on and you're like, what is happening right? It's like violating. It feels frustrating. Have you ever had the weird conversation about how much money people make based on, like, do you need some cash? I'll give you $5 to make this moment go away, or whatever that thing is. It's awkward, isn't it? I have commercials on in my house, in case you're curious. I'm one of those people. But this happens. Think about this. We're living in an era not too long ago where you were constantly being interrupted by commercials, and every show you watched, every movie you watched, and you just called it a commercial interruption and you were fine with it. It meant you got to go get water, you got to go do something, like whatever it was, you were fine with it. But now it's like, how dare they? This can't exist. And our ability to deal with it goes down. This is now normal. But what happens when it's not Spotify? What happens when it's not Netflix? What happens when it's not commercials? And what happens when we find ourselves not doing this with services and things, but we actually do this with people? What happens when our lives, get shaped by a predictive algorithm to the degree that we become less accepting of anything that is different, anything that bothers us, any of those other pieces, and what's different and what bothers us is actually people? Do you see the difficulty here? I want you to think about this for your own life. How many of us, and you don't have to raise your hands, how many of us notice that we or the people around us have less and less room in our lives for anyone who disagrees with us? They almost feel like a commercial interruption trying to sell us a product we never wanted to sign up for, like it needs to go away. How many of us notice that we or the people around us have less and less acceptance for anyone who's difficult or who bothers us in our lives? How many of us notice people wanting to eliminate other people from their lives the same way that I wanted to eliminate If You're Happy and You Know It from my vehicle forever? And it's funny, I'll meet with and talk with people and be like, and they're like, yeah, I don't talk to these people anymore. I don't talk to them. I'm like, what happened? Did you have a fight? Was there a moment? Was there a betrayal? Was there some crazy huge thing? And they're like, oh no, we disagree. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're your family. They're your friends. They're your coworkers. They're your people. It just gets harder and harder to do. And we're going to talk about this today. We need to talk about this for two reasons. One, it's key in our passage, but also this. There's a picture that God draws for us, essentially of what the kingdom of heaven will ultimately look like. And there's this vision in the book of Revelations of every tongue, tribe, and nation before the throne of God crying, holy, holy, holy. It's this depiction of the kingdom of God has every tongue, tribe, nation. That means, if you think about this, the kingdom of God is as big as it could possibly get with as many people as it could possibly fit in it, right? As broad and as big and as wide as it could possibly get. So guys, we as the church have to wrestle with this, because what happens when the kingdom we want to create right now isn't big enough to be the kingdom of God? It doesn't match the same vision, and it can get difficult. This is what happens when we find our lives shaped by a predictive algorithm. And so today we get to wrestle with a passage that might honestly be, as I thought about this, one of the least popular things we could talk about at this moment in time. I was thinking about this, right? And we didn't plan this or anything. It just is. We planned this series in October. But I did, as I thought through this, I'm like, this is a really hard thing for us to talk about right now. But we get to talk about this idea of bearing one another in love. Bearing one another in love in order to stay unified and to stay connected with one another as a people. Ephesians chapter 4. This is our passage. We've been working through this for 4 weeks and making our way through. If you've missed one of those, feel free to jump back in. You can go online and listen to one of those or whatever you missed and catch up. But we're in the final week, and I want to read this passage one last time. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1 through 3. Paul is writing this to a church like us, right? But in the first century, and he's writing from a Roman prison cell, and he says, I therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So let's look at that phrase that he uses. Let's spend some time on this morning here, where he says to bear with one another in love. Now for you, think about this. When you hear this idea of bearing with one another, what comes to your mind? When you think of this being in the Bible or wherever you've heard it used or quoted, or maybe you're new to this whole thing and you've never heard this before, but you're just thinking about this idea of bearing with one another, what comes to your mind? What do you think about? Like what association do you have with that? For me, in all honesty, every time I ever hear this phrase get used, bearing with one another, I always think of one thing. I do. And it's because there's a sermon I've heard taught multiple times on a passage that gets taught on a regular basis, and I always hear it get applicated the same way. And it's this idea of bearing one another's burdens in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. I'm going to read that to you today. This is what I think of. Paul writes to a different church, so same author, different church. He says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Whenever I heard this idea of bearing with one another, I'm like, yeah, it's when you bear one another's burdens. Now, the Greek word that Paul uses in Galatians, right, what I just read you, is the word bastazo. And bastazo defined means to bear or carry a relatively heavy or burdensome object, right? So when something's really heavy, and whenever somebody taught this to me, and whenever I heard this, it was always used this way, where it's like, look, there's going to be somebody in your life, and they're going to be going through a hard moment. They're going to be struggling through something. They're going to be carrying something heavy, in their life or whatever it is, and we get to love them right where they are. As Christians, we get to say, I want to love you like Christ loves you, and so I'm going to come alongside, and I see that that's heavy. It's like a weight on your back, and I'm going to help carry that burden with you. I'm going to help lift some weight off. I'm going to help partner. I'm going to help walk alongside you. And that becomes the goodness. That becomes the gift. I remember there was a moment here at Casas, it was years ago, and I was going through just rough season in my life. And I was confused and frustrated and all kinds of things. And I was just felt upside down. And in that season, our executive pastor at the time, his name was Darren Hoffman. And he just pulled me aside and he said, Ryan, I know you can tell you're going through a thing. if you need a place to talk to or you want to process that with somebody or meet with, like I'd love to just sit and talk with you and meet with you. And I said, yeah, I'd actually really like that. And so I met with Darren and then I met with him again and we did this countless times. And each time I would meet with him, it's almost like he came in and was like, what are you carrying right now? What's on your back? And then he'd start talking with me and it's almost like I could feel a little bit of the weight lifted. Have you ever had somebody do this for you? Feel like some of the weight's lifted, like I had a partner, like someone cared and was caring about this and carrying this with me. And it made it easier to step back into my day, into my moment, and work through the things that were mine to work through. That's bastazo. I'm so thankful to him for that. That's bastazo. That's the idea of what Paul's talking about in Galatians 6, right? It's this idea of there's this heavy burden, so we're going to lift it. But that's not the word that Paul uses in Ephesians 4. And this is hard because in our English it says to bear and to bear, right? We bear one another, like it's the same word in our English. It's a totally different word with a totally different definition in the Greek when we get to Ephesians. Galatians, bastazo, just one more reminder, right? It's to carry something heavy or burdensome for somebody else. But here in Ephesians, when Paul's talking about this, he uses the word anechomai. And you have to do that thing on, anechomai. Say it on 3 with me. 1, 2, 3. Anechomai, and then wipe the spit off of your neighbor and apologize to them, right? Anechomai is to be patient with, to tolerate, to endure, and to accept. You see, this is a very different definition than carrying a heavy burden on somebody else's back type of a thing. To be patient with, to tolerate, to endure, and to accept. This is key. Bastazo, like we talk about in Galatians, that's used to describe the weight that someone else is carrying on their back that you will help shoulder. But when we use anechomai, when Paul's talking about this in Ephesians, the weight isn't the thing the person's carrying. The weight, the thing you have to endure, to bear, to accept, is the person themselves. Isn't that crazy? It's actually the person themselves. Think about this. He's actually saying, you know what, guys? You're going to have people in your life that annoy you. You're going to have people in your life that you disagree with. You're going to have people in your life that hurt you or frustrate you or say things that bother you. You're going to have people in your life that feel like different than what it is that you would want or prefer. And in this moment, he uses the phrase, so anechomai, bear them, endure them in love. Now, if you look at that and you're like, I don't like the way that sounds at all, you have to think about this. Think of who Paul's writing to. Paul's writing to a church, right? To a bunch of people who just came together for the very first time to become a church. They're part of one big family called the church. And before they were part of the church, they didn't really like each other. In fact, they really didn't like each other. They would have annoyed each other at best. And at worst, they would have offended and frustrated and upset and angered each other to the degree that these groups of people lived their lives trying to be separate from one another as best as possible. The two primary groups in the church at that time, they were the Jews and they were the Greeks. This is the Greco-Roman world and a church that's in Greece. And so this is the Jewish people and then the Greek people. And they're trying to share life together because they're all part of one big family called the church, but they don't get along because these people do this really, really different and they think really different and they say things really different. And well, frankly, that all bothers me. And they're like, well, you do things really different and you say things really different. And what you believe, I think, is a little bit crazy. Oh yeah, well, I think you're steeped in tradition and you need to move forward. Yeah, well, I think you're losing what matters most and you need to move back. And they did not talk to each other. They did not like each other for the most part. Like they shared life in a larger society. They did not hang out. And now they're all supposed to be a church and they're supposed to be friends. And Paul's looking at these group of people because there's tension. And he's like, guys, let's not pretend like everything's fine all the time. This is not a passage you write to people that everything's fine all the time. Let's not pretend like everything's fine all the time. Let's not pretend like we never disagree. Let's not pretend like this mix of Jews and Greeks and any other group that gets added to this equation isn't going to annoy each other, isn't going to frustrate each other. Pause and think what we've been talking through the last couple of weeks. This is what this whole passage is in some way moving us towards and is about, right? Week 1, we talked about this idea of like your worth and value are anchored in Christ. So you don't have to question that. You have that. That's you. You hold these things. Your worth and value are not at stake, but it's going to get real difficult with people. So think about what he writes. We talked about humility. You know what? You don't need to be humble. You don't need to practice intentionally. You don't need to engage humility with someone who fits your algorithm. You don't have to focus on humility with someone that doesn't make you want to puff up in posture and get prideful and do those things. You need to focus on humility, and to give it away is when you're in a moment that is actually difficult. You don't need to focus on being gentle with someone that you don't want to attack. You don't need to focus on being gentle with someone that you don't want to correct, to argue with, to fight with, to engage with, to do those pieces. You don't have to focus on that because it's easy to be gentle with someone when it's just easy to be gentle. And you certainly don't need to walk with patience with someone who fits your algorithm. That doesn't need to be your focus, because you don't need to focus on patience with someone who does not require your patience. It's easy. I think Paul's literally saying through this passage, like, okay, let's not all pretend like everything is amazing all of the time and like we always just get along and everything's just beautiful and great. There's all kinds of moments that are good and beautiful that he talks about, but I think he's also making a space here where he's acknowledging we're not going to see all eye to eye all the time. In fact, sometimes we're going to look at each other and we're going to say, I don't like that, or think that, or have feelings about these things. And in those moments, we'll need to anekomai, to bear one another sometimes, because that's actually what love does. And that's actually what unity requires. I have a friend whose aging mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at one point. And she was at the early stages of this, and they just decided, you know what, I think you're gonna need some care at some point. And so her daughter, who's my friend, moved in, or had her mom actually move in with her, and began to become her mother's caretaker as she progressed through Alzheimer's. And at first that was okay, and it worked all right, and then it got harder and it got harder. And if you know anybody like this, you know that this is how that works. It became progressively difficult. And my friend would run into these moments where her mom was confused and couldn't remember something, or just wasn't quite aware of what was happening. And in those moments would express it all as just frustration. And she would say things that were so incredibly hurtful that she probably never would have said before to her daughter. And it was just harsh things sometimes. And sometimes she got so confused or was so like frustrated with what was going on and not knowing what to do in that she would get physically aggressive. And my friend had to restrain her own mom at different times, just trying to keep people safe, and keep her safe and do those pieces. And she progressed to all of this to where it finally got to the spot where she was just saying, I think we need to move into a longer term care facility, because this is no longer at a place where I'm actually capable and able to do this the way that we've been doing this. And it was a hard moment. I remember I was sitting down with her in that season of time, and I just said, how are you? She said, I'm so tired. She's like, there's just like this fatigue that sets in with all of this. And she goes, and I know it's supposed to be, you're doing the right thing and all this stuff, but I'm just so tired. And she goes, and the worst part is sometimes I just get so frustrated and I'm like about to lose my own temper. And I know that's not gonna help. And I know that's not what's good here. And I just looked at her and I said, you've been doing this for a long time. Like, that does sound hard. What's kept you going all this time? Like, what have you done that's just kept, why have you stayed in this the way you have? And not to question it, just a reminder of what matters most, in there. And she didn't miss a beat. She just looked at me like that was such an obvious thing. She goes, well, Ryan, I love her. She's my mom. And that was it, period. And I was like, wow. Okay. And then she looked at me and she goes, but I just realized this is who she is right now. This is who she will be. And she also just kind of exhaled with so much fatigue and said, and I know it's going to get worse, because that's how this works. That's what was going to happen there. And we got quiet for just a second, and she looked off to the side, almost contemplative, and then she looked at me and she goes, but think about it. Is it even really love if we only choose to love people in the moments that it's easy? And it was this powerful sentence. I just sat there looking with her. She was practicing anekomai with their mom. I know we don't like to talk about it this way. No one likes to think about it this way. She was bearing her mother. She was enduring that moment. She was tolerating, she was accepting this thing and bearing her mother. Paul writes, right, in the Greek, he writes, anakomenoi, alelon, and agape, which literally translates to bearing one another in unconditional love. And that's exactly what she was doing. That's anekomai. Now, that's hard. And I've recognized, I started sharing this with some people, and this would be a point in the message where I'd be like, well, let me talk about how to apply this. But every time I've talked with people about this, and it's been quite a few people over the last week or two here in trying to work through this, I've recognized no one likes what I'm talking about right now. Every time I share it with someone, I'm like, here's what I'm gonna talk about. They're like, I don't like that at all. They audibly say this to me. And I recognize there's tension here with this. And so I don't think we should move forward without addressing the major tensions that exist here because they're valid, but we should actually talk about them. I think there's two reasons, there's two ideas, two things why bearing, like this idea of bearing one another, we don't like. And I want to point to two of them. The first is this: we don't like the idea of bearing one another because we don't like the idea that someone would ever have to look at us and bear us. Look at us and be like, I endure you, I bear you, I tolerate you, I accept you. The last one sounds good, but not when you had the first ones, right? Like we don't like the idea of anybody looking at us and thinking of us that way. It makes us uncomfortable. But here's the thing, that's already happening to you and to me. Think about it, it's already true. People are already bearing us right now. How many of you have never met somebody in your life that didn't like you? Yeah, there's not a hand in this room that's gonna go up. And if there is, you're just not paying attention, I promise you. Right? Like I recognize for myself, I am not everybody's cup of tea. I know that because I've experienced that. I've watched that in life. And there's some people I know I'm not their cup of tea and they're still in my life, which means they're bearing me. They're literally bearing me. And if you're like, well, I don't like that either. Well, think of this. If you currently have someone in your life that you care about and they disagree with you on something important that matters and you disagree with them, but they're still in your life, you are currently bearing one another's opinions as you bear each other. You're doing that because that's uncomfortable, but you're doing it. If you live in a home where the people who also live in your home do things that drive you nuts and make you want to like put your head through a wall sometimes, you're bearing them. And if they were here, they'd be like, and we're bearing you too, right? Like they would. You're bearing one another. You're tolerating each other. You're enduring each other. If you're in a marriage and you share a bed with someone that snores like a rabid grizzly, you are bearing somebody every single time. There are 100 ways all the time that we bear each other, you guys. There are 100 ways all the time that we endure each other. This is actually normal. And I just need you to know there are plenty of people in your life right now that are already bearing you. They are enduring you. And that's okay because you're a human being. And that's also why, think of what we talked about in the first 2 weeks of this series. Does that change your worth and your value? No. Because where's it anchored? In Christ, in the God who created you. It's inside you, not rotating around you to be lost and found someplace. Like it's fixed inside you. It doesn't change your worth, doesn't change your value, doesn't make you more, doesn't make you less than. You know what it makes you? Human. It makes you a human being. And so part of this is we need to normalize this. We might need to change our expectation here because this thing that Paul's talking about is actually really good and normal. Second reason we don't like the idea of bearing with one another is because, well, if we're supposed to bear with one another, what if somebody does something hurtful or harmful? Right? That's the other piece that I keep encountering here. Are we just supposed to pretend like it's just fine and bear it? Like that's how this piece is supposed to go? And the answer to that is, well, no, not necessarily. You know, here in this church, we talk about the idea of acceptance a lot. And part of why is because it's one of the key words in our mission. If you're brand new with us today, the mission of Casas, or maybe we just need a refresher, the mission of Casas Church is to love people into the acceptance and freedom of Jesus Christ. This is core to who we are and what we do all the time, always. And so we use this word acceptance a lot. You'll see it accepted, loved, and free around here all the time. You'll see a lot of those pieces. Now, when we talk about acceptance, it's really this word. It's this word we're wrestling with here of bearing with one another, right? It's a nekomai. Because when we talk about it, here's the definition we use for acceptance. It's that you have a place with us. And in doing this together, we then have a place with you. We're making space for each other. We're accepting each other in this way so that we can be unified by something larger than anything else that might become our differences in other pieces, because Christ is that big and that powerful and he matters that much. We're doing this. And that's why it counts. But one of the things that gets confused is there is a difference between acceptance and approval. And so people get tension over this because we conflate those two things. Here's what happens. I have kids. Here's the way I illustrate this every time. I have kids. They live in my home because I don't abandon them, I guess, right? I have them. It's such a weird way I'm saying this. I'm sorry. I have 2 kids, and they don't do everything all the time in a way that I always approve of it. In fact, sometimes they do things where I'm like, I didn't like that at all. Or man, this hurts, or that wasn't okay. But they have a place in my home. They have a place with me. See, I want my kids to know there's going to be moments where I approve or don't approve of a moment, but it doesn't change where you sit with me. It doesn't change where you stand with me. You always have a place with me because I love you. And I've learned that I'm a big pain to them sometimes. And over the years, I've learned I have a place with them too, as they create that acceptance and space for me too. Now, if at any point in time, one of my kids starts operating or acting in a way that is creating harm, where ultimately it's like they're operating in a way where there's no space for anybody else, and there isn't that same type of acceptance for anybody else or any of those other pieces. Well, now I have a problem that I need to deal with. If they're creating harm in a way that's pushing other people out or that's shoving other people down or creating hurtful moments that aren't okay, I've got to now step in and have a hard conversation or have a hard moment or do that thing because I don't approve of that. But that doesn't change the fact that what we're actually after is we're all trying to uphold this idea of acceptance and trusting each other with it, maintaining it, engaging in it, having good conversations, but also difficult conversations sometimes. This is how relationships work. This is how a church works. You have a place with us as long as you continue to make a space and place for others as we all hold up this idea of a nekomai together. See, it's okay that we wrestle with these things. I just want you to know it's more normal than you think. And this idea is more important in what it means to be a human than maybe we're always aware of. So I want to offer us two applications here this morning in the form of a challenge, and just to help us move forward. And the first one is this. I want to challenge each of us, right? If we're to practice this idea of bearing with one another, well, then my challenge is this: change your expectation. I want to challenge us to change our expectations. For example, guys, as long as I expect Spotify to only play music I like and never to introduce a song that I don't like, how well do you think I'm going to be able to bear it when it starts playing "If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands"? Not really well. And the reason why is because I believe, and this is why I shouted out in my car, this shouldn't exist. This has no space in reality for me, right? This needs to go away. This needs to get eliminated. Or if we expect social media to keep showing us more and more posts that we always, and with people and things that we always agree with, who always affirm what it is that we already think, how well do you think we will be able to bear anybody who is difficult for us or disagrees with us? Not real well, because we'll go, they don't have space in this reality. They need to get eliminated or removed from this equation. That's what we'll do. But think of this, friends, as followers of Jesus Christ, united in his love and seeking to create the kingdom of God as large and as big as God actually sees it and has it. If that's us, well, then you know what? As people who are here and part of a church, I want us to expect to have great moments together, because we will. Because you guys are amazing people, and we will. But I also want us to expect to get on each other's nerves at sometimes, because we're human, because it's going to happen. I want us to expect to have these really amazing moments where we show up for each other in moments that count and that matter, because you're amazing people, because Christ is in you, and I've seen the way that you love, and that's good and beautiful. But I also want us to expect that there's going to be moments where we hurt each other sometimes, because we're actually close enough to do it. And because as human beings, we make mistakes and we step in it sometimes, don't we? I want us to expect to have moments where we agree on things that really matter to us. And we get to celebrate that and talk about it and resonate and all those things. But I also want us to expect to have moments where we disagree on things that really matter, on things that we care about with us. Because we're people from different backgrounds and upbringings and all kinds of things gathered in the space to try to do this complicated thing called being the church. Being a united people in Christ. Because that's what it is to bear one another in love. That is what it is to be human beings trying to love each other like Christ loves us, right? So we've got to change our expectations to allow that to be normal. Now, if you're looking at your own life, you're going, well, how do I do this in my life? I want to offer you a tool that you can use that'll help you with this. I didn't make this up. In fact, this is from Seth. Seth suggested this, and I think it's so incredibly helpful, and he said it's been so helpful in his own life. But it's this: stop using, I know this is really direct, but stop using should be, and start using the phrase, I don't like. So in your life, when this comes to what you speak or what you think, stop using this idea of should be as what I speak or what I think, and start using this phrase, I don't like. Let me explain with an illustration. I'm going to talk about the dishes in my house 2 weeks in a row. Right? Last week, if you weren't here, I mentioned that one of the ways you can tell when my fuse is short, is the illustration that we use, and I'm low on patience, is I get really angry over the dishes in the sink in my house. I know, it's a whole thing, and it happens. It was a couple of months ago, like a month or two ago, that I finished work, and I just thought to myself, you know what, I'm coming home, and I realize I'm gonna get home before my wife, who was still working, and before my kids, who were still at school, and she was gonna pick them up and then come home. And I got home first, and I thought, you know, I like to cook. I'm gonna make dinner, and we'll all hang out, and we'll have dinner together tonight. Like, this will be great. I'm gonna go do this. So I didn't tell anybody about that. I just chose to do that. So then I walk into my house. And I walk into the kitchen, and I'm like, I'm gonna do this thing, and I'm gonna cook this stuff, and then I walk to the sink. My sink has two partitions in it, like two sections, and both sections are filled with dishes to the top. And I'm like, that's annoying, that's frustrating. You know what, I'm just gonna put these in the dishwasher. I open the dishwasher, it is full of clean dishes and needs to get unloaded. And I was like, I'm mad, right? Like I just did. I got frustrated in that moment. I got mad, and I'm like, I want to cook for my family, and I want to do this thing, and now I can't do it because other people didn't do what they need. You know what you do. You know what we do when we're in these weird moments. And I just started to do this, where I'm like, this shouldn't be this way. There shouldn't be dishes in the sink. This sink should be emptied. The dishwasher should be emptied so that I can clean. And if you're like, man, you're like a dish tyrant, I know. Right? But that's what I thought they should be. And so do you know what happens when I think that the sink should be empty and the dishwasher should be empty and I should be able to cook and I should be able to do all these things? I have no space for reality, because you want to know what reality was? Dishes in a sink and a full dishwasher. That's truth. Because I had no space for reality, I just wanted to eliminate all of this. I'm like, this has to be eliminated. This has to go away. This has to be done. And it's my family. It's the people that matter to me, right? I just had zero capacity. How well do you think I did that day when my family walked in being like, hey, Dad, we're home from school? Not great, I'm sorry to tell you. I didn't do a very good job on that particular day, right? See, I was looking saying there shouldn't be, but the truth is I just don't like that it's true. I don't like that there's dishes in the sink, but it's really there in my reality. And you might be going like, Ryan, this is dumb. Why does this matter? Here's why this matters. When you look at a person and you tell them who they should be or what should be, what you're telling them in that moment, what you're really saying is, in my world, I don't have space for you as you are right now until you become who you ought. And love doesn't meet someone in the future. Love meets them right now, doesn't it, friends? Love doesn't meet a future realized person that you think ought to exist. Love loves the actual person that's sitting right there in front of you. And so you get to step in, and this is why changing this matters. You get to look at a sink full of dishes like me, or whatever the sink of dishes is in your life. And you could say, the truth is, I just don't like this. And that's okay. I have all my reasons for not liking this. And now I get to think about, who do I talk to, and what do I do with this, and how do I want this to go, and what's real, true, not, all that stuff that we get to do. But when it shouldn't be, it just needs to be absolutely eliminated. Do you see why this is so hard? Guys, I want to ask you a question for you to reflect on, that you may need to reflect on beyond this morning and into your life in the week to come. Is there a place in your life where you're using should be, and it's making people hard to bear? It's making a space and place and people and things hard to bear. Is there a place in your life where you're using should be? Is it in your marriage? With your kids, with your friends, with your family, in your workplace, in your community, in your city, in your country, in your world? Is there a place in your life, from the smallest of things to the largest of things, where you're using the phrase, we're using the should be moment, and consequently you just don't have any space to bear someone else because they shouldn't exist? You can create space. What would happen if you shifted to, I don't like, in order to make a little room and move forward with reality as it actually is right now? I don't know what that path will look like for you, but I promise you, it's the beginning of moving towards connection instead of separation. And that brings us to the second and final thing that I want to challenge us with here today, and it's this. And this isn't mine either. I just think this is so helpful. Decide if something is a problem to solve or a tension to manage, right? I've heard this taught from so many people in so many places. It's been so helpful in my own life. I wanted to share this with you. Decide if something is a problem to solve or a tension to manage. Here's a way to think about this. Problems are things that are issues that need to be solved so that they can be eliminated, or issues that need to be solved so they can be replaced with a solution. Do you see what I mean? Problems, we solve them, we make them go away. We want to eliminate problems from our lives. But tensions, well, tensions are just things that you manage. Sometimes you can fix a tension, but oftentimes it's just about how you're walking through it and how you want to lean in or not lean into it. Let me illustrate it this way. When my wife and two girls walked in the house and I stood there in front of the sink full of dirty dishes, I was so frustrated. And by the way, I should pause. I'm really annoying in my own house and they get mad at me too. They just don't have a microphone right now, right? So I'm just sharing I'm just sharing with you my perspective in one of my moments. But when my two girls walked in the house and my wife with them, I stood and I'm standing in front of the dirty dishes and I'm so frustrated and I look and I go, why is this like this? And my youngest, who was supposed to actually empty the dishwasher that day, or it was supposed to already happen, she goes, Dad, I loaded it this morning and I started it before I left for school and I plan on emptying it when I got home from school so that we could work on dinner. And I was like, well, that's a really good answer. That's a great answer you gave me right there. Cool. And then I look and I'm like, yeah, but what about this sink full of dishes? And my other daughter was like, well, I was going to take care of those dishes the moment the dishwasher is empty. And then we were going to, partner and we're going to figure out dinner and that type of thing. And I was like, that's a good answer too. You're going to do that. They were already planning on this. Okay, cool. That's fine. I didn't tell anybody I was going to come home early and cook or do any of these things. And because those seem like good answers, I did the thing that many of us in marriages or relationships do that you shouldn't, is I'm still angry. And so I'm like, well, you two seem good. I'm going to look at my wife now. I did. And so and this isn't fun for me to talk about, but it's true, I did this. And so I look at her and I just need this to go somewhere. So I look at her and I go, I'm just so tired sometimes of being the person who has to stay on these guys about doing this stuff and getting the person who's frustrated about what's in the sink and all these moments right now. And it's frustrating. And she just stops me and she goes, I don't understand what's happening right now. She goes, we actually talked about all of this already. I've already had the conversation with them. They already had a plan. They're already going to change that thing. And we had no idea that you were going to make dinner, but you're really frustrated. And I said, yeah, and it's not fair. And you ever have that moment where you stop and you just go, I don't like me. I don't like this. I don't like anything right now. That's where I was, guys. This is not a good moment for me. It's embarrassing a little bit. And I just found myself going I don't like this. I don't like how this is going. And I share this as an example, as an illustration. And all of a sudden I had this moment of clarity where I just started thinking, I was like, my kids are never, for the most part, going to care about the dishes the way I care about the dishes, because they don't cook very much and they're probably not going to. And as the person who cooks, I care about the kitchen differently, and that's okay. I can't really expect that to change until they get to a stage in their life where they're actually cooking and doing those things and caring about that. In the meantime, we can just try to do this better. And I thought about my wife, and I thought, she works so hard. She does all these things around her house and all this other stuff that constantly. It's constantly working hard on all this stuff. But here's what I know. She hates doing the dishes. It's one of her least favorite things on the planet. I know this. Do you know it's not going to change? My wife isn't going to magically wake up next week on a Thursday and be like, something happened? I love dishes now. It's not going to happen. It's never going to occur. And it suddenly occurred to me, we're going to fight about this for the rest of our lives. And all of a sudden I started smiling because I thought that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever thought. And you might go, that's so weird, but it's not. I found myself suddenly pausing and walking over to my wife and sitting down and going, I'm sorry. This is so me and not necessarily you guys right now. And I'm sorry that I did this and that I unloaded on you all this way. And she looks at me. And you have to understand, my wife grew up in a household with an alcoholic parent where everything would explode if anybody ever got angry. And so she learned over time, you try to minimize that, keep the peace, and frustration can often be hard. She's grown so much over the course of her life and she's doing awesome with all of that. But I know this is a tension. And so I sit and I say that to her, and she looks at me and she goes, I just hate it when you get so frustrated and it feels like we're already trying and we're trying to do a good job with this, and I don't know how to fix this right now. And I looked at her and I just said, I love you. I don't think you need to fix this. I actually think this isn't a problem to be solved. This is just a tension we're going to manage. I was like, I don't think you're ever going to love doing the dishes, and that's okay. I plan on being frustrated with you for the rest of my life. And she looked at me and she said, right back at ya. But I sort of hate that. And I got to look at her and say, but I think in some ways this is me learning what unconditional love really looks like. than it really is. You don't need to change a thing. You're still my favorite person. You're still the person I choose. You're still the person that I want to walk life with. I don't need any of that to be different. Your worth and value aren't on the line, and I know you see me the same way. This just is a moment, and we'll find our tensions as we go, won't we? She said, yeah, because it's a tension to manage and not necessarily a problem to solve. But the way I was going about it as a problem to solve is I needed to eliminate things. And if they didn't eliminate that, what would I end up doing? Starting to eliminate people, wouldn't I? I know that's a weird way to talk about it, but play that out over space and time. This is how this works. Is it a tension to manage or a problem to solve? Friends, we are the church. In closing, we are the church. We all come from different places, different families, different backgrounds, different upbringings, with different conflicts and different struggles. You have all been through different things. You have all journeyed your own journey and walked through the difficulties and moments and strengths and weaknesses and things that are uniquely yours. And you've made your way forward. And at some point in time, each of us, because you exist in this space, decided that we would put our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, that he would be the way, the truth, and the life in our lives. And suddenly we became a one another. We became a larger thing called the church, and it's really beautiful. It's this random gathering of assorted people with all of our complexities and all of our backgrounds and all of our differences and all of our things. And we are going to annoy each other because we're us. And we are going to disagree with each other because we're us. And we are going to get frustrated with each other because we're human beings. And yet, if we stay centered in Christ, if we let him be what actually matters most, and we let his love and his acceptance and his worth and his value become like an anchor for our hearts and lives, we actually get to love each other with patience and gentleness and humility and bear one another in unconditional love. And if you start with that, my prayer for you is that if you start with that, in the smallest of your relationships to the largest of your relationships, what you will find is that through your heart and through your life, you begin creating a kingdom within you and a kingdom around you that's as big as the kingdom of God. It's as big as the kingdom that God actually paints for us all, because you're all a part of it.